The recount is underway in Wisconsin, and the Trump campaign ain't having none of it. They're basically objecting to everything, or at least that's what the Biden campaign is complaining about. You see, in one instance, the Trump campaign said, we want absentee ballots kept in a separate pile from the votes. We want to compare them because sometimes there's different ink on the envelope than there is on the ballot. That doesn't make sense. I mean, there might be an explanation in some instances. You filled out the ballot and then you went, oh, my pen's dead, and you switched pens. When I filled out my ballot and secrecy envelope, I had one pen. I filled it out. I put it in the envelope. I filled it out. I was done. So the Trump campaign is getting real serious. And of course, the canvassers in Wisconsin and the Biden campaign are acting like it's oh so too difficult. But you know what? Good. I'm glad Donald Trump is dragging this through, because now we're actually getting a hard audit to a certain degree of our elections. And in my opinion, we can't just ignore the elections as though everything's fine and carry on. I think there's got to be some kind of hard scrutiny on our election systems, because I'll tell you this. One thing I've learned from Donald Trump's campaign and from this election cycle is that there are widespread errors and irregularities. And that's coming from a Democrat in Michigan who said, just certify the results. These errors happen everywhere all the time. Why would we accept that? That's insane. Trump objects to counting thousands of Wisconsin ballots. I like how they say Trump, but it's the Trump campaign. I mean, Trump personally isn't there. They say in Madison, Wisconsin, the recount of the presidential election in two of Wisconsin's most heavily Democratic counties began on Friday, with President Donald Trump's campaign seeking to discard tens of thousands of absentee ballots that it alleged should not have been counted. Trump's three objections attempting to discard the ballots were denied by the three-member Dane County Board of Canvassers twice on bipartisan votes. Trump was expected to make the same objections in Milwaukee County ahead of a court challenge once the recount concludes, perhaps as soon as Wednesday. It's not going to end, is it? Joe Biden won Wisconsin by 20,600 votes and carried Dane and Milwaukee counties by a 2-1 margin. Trump only paid for recounts in those two counties, not in the 70 others, 58 of which he won. There's no precedent for a recount overturning a deficit as large as Trump's in Wisconsin. So his strategy is widely seen as seeking to build a case to take to court. His team on Friday sought to have ballots discarded where election clerks filled in missing address information on the certification envelope where the ballot is inserted. Any absentee ballot where a voter declared themselves to be indefinitely confined under the law, and any absentee ballot where there was not a written application on file, including roughly 69,000 that were cast in person during the 2 weeks before Election Day. Hold on a minute. Wait. Absentee ballots where no one applied for them? I think Trump's going to win in that specific fight, not the whole thing. I don't know if Trump's going to win the whole thing, but it sounds like in that case, at least Trump is probably going to win that one. Amy Coney Barrett is now in charge of this circuit. If there's an emergency order filed or something, Amy Coney Barrett might say, we're going to pass this along to the full Supreme Court, because doesn't it seem a little odd that someone would send in an absentee ballot when they did not request one? Makes you think, doesn't it? They say Trump attorney Chris Trupis argued that certification envelopes filled out by people who voted absentee in person do not count under the law as a written application, even though the envelope is identified as such. The Board of Canvassers, controlled 2-1 by Democrats, voted unanimously to reject the complaint, in which case it sounds like it was Democrat to Republican. Trupis also argued that people claimed to be indefinitely confined even though they were not. Such a declaration exempts the voter from having to show a photo ID to cast their ballot, which Trupis called an open invitation for fraud and abuse. The Republican-controlled Wisconsin Supreme Court this spring ruled that it is up to individual voters to determine whether they are indefinitely confined, in line with guidance from the bipartisan Wisconsin Elections Commission. The canvassing board voted 2-1 to count those ballots, with the Republican opposed. Trump's attorney also claimed that the law does not allow clerks to fill in missing information on the envelope that goes with absentee ballots. The State Elections Commission told clerks before the election they can fill in missing information on the absentee ballot envelopes, a practice that has been in place for at least the past 11 elections. The canvassing board voted unanimously to count those ballots. Trump is lining up a legal challenge on these grounds. But let's read on. In both Madison and Milwaukee, the recounts were taking place in large convention centers so workers could be distanced to protect against spreading the coronavirus. Observers were required to wear masks and plexiglass shields were set up. Milwaukee County Clerk George Christensen, a Democrat, said it was irresponsible of Trump to force the recount amid the pandemic that is surging in Wisconsin. Are you kidding me? Trump, you should give up. Just stop fighting this in this race because of COVID. No, it's a presidential election, and it's going to extend well beyond the limits of just this pandemic. So please, we should not just stop because of this. And you know what? The Democrats might say, but COVID. Yes, but COVID. I know, but it's too bad. The election has to happen. I'll tell you what. You know what? Maybe you're right. We should throw out the whole election and extend the election by several months so that Donald Trump can get a fair shake because of COVID. No, it doesn't work that way. You can't reject the process because of COVID. Otherwise, Trump could have done the same. In Milwaukee, Reverend Greg Lewis, a founding president of groups of faith leaders who sought to bolster black turnout, said the recount highlights the oppression, disenfranchisement, downright racism, and disrespect that minority communities in Milwaukee face. Quote, "I almost died, and we are running around over here counting votes unnecessarily," said Lewis, who contracted COVID-19 earlier in the year. "This is nonsense. This is pitiful. Why do we keep putting up with this? The people have decided, let it be." Because the people haven't decided. There's a legal constitutional process. And while I sympathize with this guy who got COVID, I hope he's healthy. I hope he's all right. Racism? Because you want to count votes? I've said it before, but imagine this. Imagine there are voting irregularities or maybe even fraud outright in minority communities. That fraud undermines the will of those communities, and thus giving them a recount gives them extra protections, in which case I would argue it's actually not racist at all. It's the opposite. You're actually giving them an advantage, making sure their votes are secure. And then in these other districts where it might not be minority community, you have people whose votes might get diluted by fraud, and we don't check on that. Well, it sounds like we're providing extra scrutiny, and it's a good thing. Now, over in Milwaukee, apparently, this is in Milwaukee. It seems like they're actually starting to agree with the Trump campaign. They say, the Milwaukee County recount is officially underway at the Wisconsin Center. The Board of Canvassers opened up around 10 a.m. Friday with a test of the tabulating machines. Within 5 minutes of the commission opening up the recount, a representative from the Trump campaign expressed concerns with the process. He said with the setup, the observers cannot view the ballots and gave a list of demands. He asked that this be cleared up before any counting of the ballots is done. Quote, "I've been informed by our observers that this procedure does not allow them to see and observe the ballots, and I object to that," said Stuart Carge, a Trump representative. The Trump campaign has also asked for information based on the absentee ballot applications. We have 8 objections from the Trump camp in Milwaukee. The Trump campaign has been informed by observers. Whether sitting or standing, they are unable to see through the plexiglass and observe the ballots and materials being reviewed by election workers. Therefore, they believe there is an inadequate opportunity to observe the ballots. They're requesting items 2 through 7. They want to ensure that there is a Trump observer at each table. 2, they're requesting that all written applications for absentee ballots are present during the recount and set aside for observation. Requesting that all absentee ballot envelopes without a written application are set aside for observation. All absentee ballot envelopes with different ink set aside. All absentee ballot logs are available that they include all absentee applications. 6, all absentee envelopes and applications that identify indefinitely confined voters are set aside for observation. All copies or other evidence of all photo ID from any absentee ballot are set aside, and they're requesting that all data from all the tabulating machines and all images of the ballots be preserved today and available for observation, and that any and all audit trails and or error trails from tabulating machines November 2 through 5th be made available for observation, as well as the names of any technicians that performed any of this work. They are going hard. Wow. They really believe there's fraud, and they want all the evidence. It's amazing that this investigation is essentially being done through some kind of legal process instead of a law enforcement process. But hey, they think there's fraud. And if they get those names, I wonder if there is. And I wonder if the people who may be involved in it are going to be worried. Maybe that's why Democrats are trying so hard to stop this. Instead of saying, do your thing, because come December 14th, we won. Instead, they're saying, stop counting, stop. It's unnecessary. You're racist. Numerous accusations of racism have been swirling. I think we need an audit. I think it all should be audited, and we should be looking for fraud. Trump is convinced. He was convinced last time. He's convinced now. How about this? Democrats, you don't like Trump? Give baby his bottle. If you think you won, then say, fine, Trump, do your little audit and stop wasting time. Instead, they're like, no, because he's trying to upend the election. How? Didn't you win? Didn't you win? Then what are you worried about? Joe Biden's already president-elect, they said. Then what are you worried about? I got a couple tweets from Mike Cernovich I want to show you. He says, Trump is closing in on 74 million votes. He pulled up GOP House with him. The only GOP candidates with a future will play tit for tat with Democrats. Dems lied about FISA, Kavanaugh, Covington, Smollett, Russia backing election, and more. Trump is giving them payback, and he should. He said, I don't think the court cases will go anywhere. But who knows? Anything is possible when you never quit. I'm glad Trump is dragging this out. I was called a Russian asset by Joy Reid, as was veteran Jack Posobiec. Democrats are getting what they gave, and I love it. I'm not all about tit for tat. I'm not all about retribution or revenge or anything like that. But I'll tell you what I do want to see. I want to see that if the Democrats come out and they play dirty, that Republicans don't just sit on their hands. Please like me, they say. I'm not saying tit for tat. I'm not saying, act in kind. I'm saying if they're going to play dirty games, go through the legal process to audit the votes and figure it out. Certainly looks like dirty games have been played the entire time, but I don't think the Republicans are actually doing much about it. It's just Trump. But I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up in just a few minutes. Stick around and I will see you all shortly.